We will get started. We have our Board of the Waterworks Trustees. It's November 26th. We have a consent agenda. We have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we now have our public comment period for anyone interested in speaking on an agenda item or anything else before the Board of Trustees. And it looks like we primarily have staff here, so we'll move on. Action item number 3, this is a public hearing. So I'm going to open the public hearing and
For the 2020 proposed budget.
yes, for the proposed 2020 budget, item 3A. And would anyone like to speak on behalf of it? If not, we're going to close the public hearing. Ted, have there been any comments regarding this?
We have received no comments on the proposed 2020 budget.
And thank you to the Finance and Audit Committee for working on this for months, leading up to the budget that we are going to be voting on today. So with this, I would look for a motion to approve the 2020 Des Moines Water Works budget.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Moving along, we have item 3B, the 2020 water treatment chemicals analysis. And my goodness, that's quite the spreadsheet.
Indeed. If I may, see just a couple of quick comments. Obviously, a big part of the water treatment process is using a number of chemicals to remove, enhance, improve, purify the water. What you see here is the complete list of all the treatment chemicals that we use at all of the plants, and you can see the 2019 cost and the 2020 cost. Most of them did not go up significantly. Some even went down a little bit, which is a positive. One thing I would like to highlight for the board is the page following the yellow is our annual memo on lime. Lime is one of the more expensive chemicals we use in terms of the total cost. We have some options in terms of supplier. One of the interesting things is that not all of the products from all of the suppliers are the same purity. And so we have to go through an analysis with a third party who does an analysis for us each year to determine what the purity of each product is, and then we do a little bit of math to ensure that we are recommending the product that is most cost effective for the utility. And again, this year that would be Mississippi lime at both treatment plants, as opposed to the product from the other two vendors. And so other than that, there's a nice analysis on the last page within this section of the board packet that shows how much of each chemical we anticipate using, and based on the prices that we receive, what the total cost will be just over $5 million worth of water treatment chemicals we use each year. That's about a 4% increase over last year. But if there are no questions.
Why is it different per plant
Why is the
price?
cost different?
Yeah, and in some case.
Yeah, it has something to
Okay.
do with the amount of chemical that they're going to provide. If we're only, historically, we used one vendor here because their product was cheaper, and we used a different vendor at the McMullen plant because the process we use out there would not effectively function with the product from the other vendor that was less pure, had more grit, it plugged up the equipment out there. So we used to do it at, we used different vendors at the two plants. So we bid it for each plant, and then we bid it collectively, and when we bid it collectively, we get a better price because they sell us more product. And that makes the difference, as it turns out, through this analysis in which vendor or which option we choose. But it has to do with the ability to use that product or the products at the McMullen plant through that process.
Okay.
We may have other discussion, but first let's get a motion on the table to award the 2020 contracts for water treatment chemical supplies to the above bidders.
So moved. Second.
Any other discussion? Good question there, so. Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next, we have the Des Moines Water Works Rules and Regulation Update. And I'm sure that everyone found the information on the fire hydrant. I thought that was, I had no idea, I had not read that before, but Ted, do you want to take this?
Absolutely, Sue. This is another annual process that we go through, updating our rules and regulations, and the entire text of the document is included in your packet, highlighting each and every change if you'd like to see them in context. This item did go to the November Planning Committee meeting. Jenny gave a presentation. I unfortunately wasn't there, but I understand that we went through the document and the changes pretty carefully. A couple of significant changes, I would call them, important changes. One, we're going to begin allowing a pipe product called PEX-A, which is a type of plastic pipe for water service lines that can be direct buried, as opposed to the older generations of PEX pipe, which were not as robust and had to be protected with sand backfill or casing pipes. We are, as you mentioned, Sue, we're going to require that private fire hydrants be painted red going forward instead of the yellow color scheme that we use with green caps and bonnets. And Jenny, do you know if they're going to require, or the fire department is going to expect that to happen retroactively, just going forward?
Going forward.
And that's important because they want to be able to see which ones are public and which ones are private, because private hydrants tend to not be maintained as well, frankly. And so they want to know which ones are ours because they have more faith in those. And then the city of Des Moines has actually agreed to start allowing the type of meter pit that we have historically used out in the county inside the city, much more cost effective and smaller and easier for our folks to use because they don't have to go down into the pit. The meter setting actually raises up out of the pit and they can work on it without entering the confined space. So those, in addition to our annual fee changes, are the significant changes.
So I'm looking for a motion to approve the proposed revisions to the rules and regulations with an implementation date of January 1st, 2020, and direct publication of the changes as required by statute.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion?
I've got one quick question, it may not really matter, but PEX-A pipe, is that a proprietary name, or is that a description of a type of
It's a
material?
type. Yeah, it's a type, not unlike PVC.
Okay.
The PEX is a cross-linked polyethylene, and type A is just a new designation that designates this more robust type of PEX.
I assumed that was the case, I just, sometimes, I was on a board once where they specified a type of roofing that
Mhm.
was proprietary.
Right,
And
brand name.
we didn't find out that we were just basically limiting ourselves to one vendor.
Great question.
So I just-
That's not the correct case, correct,
There's
James?
multiple vendors that provided.
Yes.
Perfect.
Great question, thank you.
And
Yeah, I need to apologize to fellow committee members that I didn't bring one thing up, it's on the fees.
Mhm.
And not to bring up the subject, but just the fees. 511.34.2. It has to
511, I'm getting there.
It has to do with our backflow fees. And the time when they were initiated last year, it wasn't mentioned to us that we send out shut-off notices when the renewal of the backflow testing hasn't been sent in. It was just said, it was just presented to us that people weren't having their backflows tested, and this would make them do it on time. But if we're sending out termination notices, I don't think we need to have $100 and $200 or $300 non-performance fee on there. I think we should see if having your water shut off is enough encouragement to have your backflows tested.
What was the number again, Dave?
115
No.
days. Oh,
it's on page 166. If you're going from pages.
511.34
Point two.
is, yeah, 511.34.2, and it's on the document I have, it's on page 511-17.
Going the wrong direction.
I found it, okay, thank you.
Yeah, so backflow fees is the,
There it is, okay.
yep, right there. And I think, historically, we have sent notices to people that their backflow device was due to be tested. And if they didn't test it, we went through a series of letters telling them that they needed to test it, and then ultimately that their service would be terminated.
I think we still do, yeah.
And
This is part of what's gonna be incorporated in the new CIS system, so
Mhm.
some of this has not gotten put into motion. This is how it's going to be going forward with the new CIS
What's that?
system. The new computer customer service,
What's gonna be changed?
these letters will be able to be sent out with the late fees. Cause today instead said we've done the traditional letter, we keep sending letters and letters and letters, and then we end up terminating. Now we'll be doing the fees, so that makes it more of an incentive to get it done.
So to be clear, the letter would go out saying you're charged a late fee before a termination notice.
Correct.
But that's not happening yet.
It's in the process, we're trying to figure out how to make it happen with the new software that's being implemented for customer service.
So they get charged late fees and then water gets shut off, or?
If they don't get it done, these are steps, instead of just sending another notice, now it's a late fee with the notice. And then a higher late fee and then a termination.
So you're hoping the late fee gets the attention
Exactly.
before you send out a termination notice. It's like an intermediary step, if you will.
Correct.
It's more profitable to us to do that, but
Well, it's more
Well-
powerful than just a letter saying, do it, and they're not doing it.
or they're gonna be shut off. They get notices they'll be shut off now.
The problem was that the termination notices have not been successful. We send them notices that they're gonna be shut off, and we still don't get the backflow devices tested. And then ultimately, we end up shutting them off,
And then you get a test.
and then they get it tested.
Okay.
And then, but the point is, we'd rather not have to go through all those steps. We don't wanna collect these fees either, David. I mean, this is not intended to be a moneymaker.
Are we gonna do that on late bills then? Add $300 to the bill?
That's
get
not
their
the plan,
attention.
no. That's not the plan.
I just had a lot of comments on this.
I don't know that we've had anyone pay the fee yet.
Not to my knowledge.
Have we sent out,
I'm not involved in the day-to-day of this, so I need to,
It looks like going forward, this is the plan as to how we would do it, so that rather than just getting a letter saying you need to do it, then we can back it up by saying you haven't done it, we're gonna charge you a late fee. And if they continue to not do it, there are financial implications with it.
Yeah, what this actually says, but our process may be different, but what this says is that 15 days late, they get a $100 fee, and then at 30 days late doing this, they get a $200, $300 total.
In addition to that, correct.
Does this need to spell out the termination? The rules and regulation, do we need to spell out termination?
I think that's in the rule in another place.
And this was something we talked about last year, this isn't new this year.
Right. But it would be interesting to me to know where we are with this, and I guess if the system wasn't yet capable of doing this, I'm not sure that last year was the appropriate time to implement this, but can you just give us an update on where we're at, and if we're doing this yet, or what the process is, or if we're still sending letters that say that their service is gonna be terminated and this hasn't happened yet? I'd like to know that, first of all, just where are we?
Okay.
But our whole goal here is to get away from this process where dozens, if not hundreds of customers are going through this threat of termination because they haven't tested. Historically, we didn't turn anyone off. And so it got to be so many letters that were being sent every month to people threatening termination. We weren't really turning them off, and they knew we wouldn't really turn them off. More recently, we started turning them off.
Yeah, why not?
We just didn't have the staff, David, to be honest. More recently, we've added staff in the back of the department, and we've tried to improve that. But then it's problematic for some of these customers to be turned off, and then we get into disputes with them and arguments, and our goal is to incent them to have the device tested annually as is required, without being turned off or without paying any fees. That's the goal. Ideally, we would never collect any of these fees, and we would never turn anyone off for non-testing. The fees have been shown in other jurisdictions to be more effective than the threat of termination, and so that's why we went this route.
I just, well, I have some problems with this stuff, and, along with this, I've had more comments on this than anything.
From
And
people who have received letter fees.
Just people that are having to do the backflows, and, now we're gonna, have another money maker. Nothing's been nice. And I've had probably 6 or 7 people. Does the staff run their own backflow inspection businesses? They're saying that people that work here, and they're getting stuff that, well, if you've had trouble with, remember how so many people were not getting, they were faxing it in and it was being lost? I've had 50 people tell me that, and I know it's true, no matter, we don't want to admit. But now I've even had suggestions that I take such and such a company, because it's somebody that works there and we won't have problems. Do some of our staff have companies that do backflow inspections?
Not that I'm aware of.
Really? Because they were telling people that they had permission from management.
Who? I guess we need to follow up on that. Now, I'm not aware of anyone here
Really?
who's running a backflow testing company on the side, if that's what you're suggesting.
That's
You know,
interesting.
It'd be helpful if we could have specifics as opposed to,
Well, I can't tell you that if any plumber or anybody that does business with us, I gave their name, they'd be in trouble. I know, but I know for a fact that one employee was. I don't know if he still is. And I was told that it's okay because he'd been given permission. So you don't know anything about it.
I do not.
Interesting.
What I would suggest is we take this offline. It kind of sounds like we're getting into more of a personnel matter, and you can touch base with Ted and Doug. I would think we would have some kind of conflict of interest.
That's what I feel.
Employment,
I would agree.
if that were the case, but
It's interesting.
Why don't we
Especially
take-
if staff is suggesting it, but not knowing who it is or not
Right.
having. But I agree that this wouldn't be the place to suggest or share that information, so that I'll check with David afterwards. We can get some specifics.
There's obviously a great deal of work in the rules and regulations. I think it might be nice to have a follow-up, maybe at the planning meeting, just the things that you're asking to hear about, Ted, but with that, did we already get a motion on this?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I think so.
We can certainly come back and review and understand what the letters say, when we're putting it in place, and just lay out the process a little bit further at a follow-up planning meeting, whether it's the next one or January or whatever. That would be my suggestion, if that's all right with everyone, to address some of the questions that Dave has. Any other suggestions? With that, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Item 3D, acceptance of the 2019 Des Moines Water Main Replacement Contract 1. Ted?
Yes, this was our first water main replacement contract of the year, completed within the city of Des Moines. Just a couple of streets on this project. 48th Street south of Ingersoll, Park Avenue. The project is complete. There's one change order related to some changes required on Park Avenue, about 2.7% difference from the beginning to the end, but the work is complete, and staff would recommend that the board accept the project.
So I'm looking for a motion to accept the 2019 Des Moines Water Main Replacement Contract 1, completed by Synergy Contracting LLC in the amount of $811,755.40.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. And that was done on time, I believe, too, with great communication from our engineering staff to Southwestern Hills, so thank you.
Thank you for that.
Item 3E, acceptance of the 2019 Polk County Water Main Replacement Contract 1.
Again, a water main replacement contract in Polk County. North of Des Moines here, one change order on that project as well. Odds and ends within the scope of the contract, about a 4% differential there. The project is complete, on time as well, and staff would recommend that the board accept this project.
So I'm looking for a motion to accept the 2019 Polk County Water Main Replacement Contract 1, completed by GM Contracting, Inc., in the amount of $1,082,935.45. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 3F, approval of consent, hold harmless, and indemnification agreement for West Des Moines monument to be located within a water main easement area.
This is basically a welcome to West Des Moines sign. This is a rendering of what that sign is going to look like at the corner of 98th and University. It's a large sign that there you can see there on the right hand side of the drawing there. And that sign is actually going to be placed partially in a water main easement that we have for the water main that goes out to the tower that is shared by West Des Moines and Waukee and Clive in that area. We worked with West Des Moines to allow the construction, or actually allow their easement to be within our easement, because that's where they needed the sign to go. We feel that the work can be done without impacting our feeder main, our transmission main in that area, that we'll be able to operate and maintain our facilities. But we did want to have a hold harmless, lest we have a leak there or a break that would somehow damage this large sign. We didn't want to become responsible for the cost of that damage. And so that's what we have here before us today, is that hold harmless agreement that has been reviewed by staff and legal, and we would recommend that the board authorize us to execute that agreement with West Des Moines. The
We're
city of West Des Moines.
We're looking for a motion then for the board to approve and sign the consent agreement to accommodate the erection of the City of West Des Moines monument sign within the Des Moines Waterworks water main easement area.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
I'd just like to say that as the regional provider of water, it's nice for us to be able to do these types of things.
Work cooperatively with our regional partners.
You could say City of West Des Moines with water by the Central Iowa Water.
So when they need their summer peaking water, they have it.
A very important line for that, as it turns out.
Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 3G, and Michelle, thank you for the follow-up and noting that this didn't come through on the first one, but adding the license agreement extension to the right to farm agricultural land at the Moffett Reservoir.
Indeed, we have a small amount of agricultural land on the property in or around Moffett Reservoir. There used to be more, but we've taken some of it out of the agreement over the years to ensure we weren't farming in the floodplain and to implement some best management practices. Historically, we have bid this license agreement for a 3-year term and then extended it for additional years. Most recently, we rebid this license in 2016 for the 17, 18, and 19 crop years. So that first term since the most recent bid expires with this crop year. We are proposing to extend that same agreement at the same price for another 3 years. We have a producer out there who does a very nice job, good steward of the land, very cooperative in terms of implementing best management practices, cover crops, prairie strips, those kind of things. They work with us pretty well. The rental rate that they bid in 2016 is still well above the average in this area, which you can see some averages there that Jessica has provided for us in Dallas County of $215 per acre, statewide $219 per acre, and they're at $261 per acre. So what we still feel is more than reasonable. They're also significantly higher than all of the other bidders in 2016. So instead of going through that process again, we felt it was more appropriate to just simply extend for 3 more years. And so we would recommend that the board authorize us to extend this license agreement for 3 more years.
So we're looking for a motion to authorize the CEO and general manager to execute the license agreement extension for the right to farm Des Moines Waterworks agricultural land for the 2020, 2021, and 2022 crop years.
So moved.
And a second. Any discussion?
So I just have a quick question. So we are, we're doing this, they're paying us rent minus the cost of implementing conservation practices rather than just making conservation practices a condition of their rental agreement.
Correct.
So how much are how much are we reimbursing in conservation practices?
Jessica, do you know how
It
much?
depends on how they're applied, whether it's aerial seeding or they drill them in, which depends on what crop you have. So if there's soybeans out there, Flint's can use their drill and they drill in the seed. That's a lot cheaper than aerial seeding. Aerial seeding's a lot more. So the price range in the last couple of years has been $3,000 to $4,000. Is what the cost is for the seed and then planting it, whether it's aerial or drilling.
Is there any way we can just make conservation practices a condition of whoever is working this land?
We could, but
I think it is a condition in the lease, it's just we agree to reimburse reimburse it because we require it.
Right. And it's, because of the differences in cost, and depending on the rotation, it's, we've just chosen not to do it that way. I'm sure we could, but the rent would likely be substantially lower. We also like the flexibility of asking them to do things that, we asked them to participate in a honeybee study that Iowa State University was doing and provide seed, and there isn't a lot of cost, but we've liked the flexibility in being able to ask them to do what we want them to do. And so we've chosen to just do it as a reimbursement, but I'm confident that we could incorporate it if we thought that was the best route.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And 3H then is license agreement extension for the right to harvest grass hay at the Marathon Reservoir.
Again, very similar. We last bid this in 2016 for the 17, 18, 19 crop years. The Flynn's bid at that time was by far the highest. We have looked at averages in and around the area, Dallas County, $130 an acre. State average $119 an acre. They're paying $147 an acre for the right to harvest grass hay. The same producer who produces on our 100 acres of row crop land. We are recommending here again to just simply extend this agreement for a second 3-year term as opposed to rebidding it this year.
We're looking for a motion to authorize the CEO and general manager to execute the license agreement extension for the right to harvest grass hay on the Des Moines Waterworks agricultural land for the 2020, 2021, and 2022 crop years. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? In your packet under 3I, you will see the proposed schedule for 2020 board committee meetings. And that takes us to the CEO selection process.
I would say the only thing on that is
Yes.
all of my dates I show 2019. But I'm sure that the years were supposed to be.
Oh, on the board meeting? Oh, I know. I thought they were supposed to have 20.
Okay, so we'll update that. The CEO selection process update, as a follow-up to a discussion that we had at our last meeting. I think this is something that the entire board would like to be involved in. We had talked about possibly assigning a subcommittee as we did in the 2011 timeframe, but it was suggested by Graham, and I think everyone agreed that the entire board would like to be part of this.
So before we do that, the board dates were set up for a motion. I don't think we did a motion.
Oh, do we have to take a motion on that? A motion to adopt the proposed 2020 schedule for the Des Moines Waterworks Board of Trustee meetings with the correction of all board meetings being for 2020. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks for catching me. So as part of the CEO selection process, the board suggested that we would ask Doug to start to pull together some information. This particular item, we are not asking for any kind of action, but just an update. And Doug, I think you have some information that we'll be sharing with the board.
Yeah, I can just briefly go over basically what's included here in the agenda item form. So I reached out to a total of 6 executive search firms and requested they respond to the bulleted items that are listed there. And we received a total of 5 responses back. Those mostly came in early last week. I've not done a lot of review of the actual responses other than just to pull together some quick information. for this document. We had 5 firms again that responded. 4 are national firms, 1 is a local firm. Their range of fees, we have 4 firms that were between $22,000 and $26,500 for their base fee. There would be some additional fees involved if we had potentially flying in candidates from elsewhere, those types of expenses that would be added, which is pretty normal. The last firm, their price, their proposed fee was quite a bit higher at $60,000. So all of them had a time frame, mostly 12 to 13 weeks. We had one of the firms that said probably take at least 15 weeks. I heard from at least a couple of the firms that given the holidays, that's even, they're thinking it'll be, March or April before the entire process would be completed. So, so those are the firms that are listed there, the 5 that we heard back from.
What do you think, Doug, or do you have an idea for us? I mean, if the board is acting as the selection committee, do you think we'd be in a position where we might be able to select the search firm at our December meeting and then start the process in January, or have you even thought about that?
Can I just jump in on that first, because I know the entire board wants to be involved, but I think we'd also like a little more information, and I know we've canceled the finance and audit meeting for the month of December. Do we want to have kind of a working group meeting before we would take that to the December meeting? Or do you want this to be a presentation at the December meeting with action?
This is just for the selection of the
firm.
selection firm.
Yes, the selection of the selection.
Correct.
I don't know.
I could just mention that last time too. I think that we had, there were, I think half-hour conference calls that time the search committee held with each of the firms that responded. That there were, I think, 4 firms, and so the search committee had about a 2-hour time frame where they phone reviewed each of those firms. I think there was maybe 1 firm that was local that actually came in and presented in person, but that was how that process was handled in 2012. So review those and make a decision.
Do you think, and I'm just trying to think of how we narrow down the 5. In your brief review of these, are there, I mean, obviously the one's charging a lot more than the others, but is there, how hard is it gonna be to narrow it down to 3? Is that something that, I'm just talking out loud here, is that something we can delegate to Doug to narrow it down to a choice of 3 and then let the board, narrow the choice from 3, or should we look at the entire list?
I think that would be a nice way if Doug could provide us with maybe an executive summary of your contact with them, your discussion with them, questions they may have had. And I mean executive summary, it doesn't have to be lengthy. And so that we'd have a little more information as we make that call.
And I would be interested in, Doug giving us some sort of guidance about, he doesn't have to rank them by any means, but, if it was clear to you, Doug, where these 3 really kind of stand out in the group, that might be helpful to us, I mean, you know more about this process than we do.
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
And then, but that's to your larger question, I don't know how to answer your question, Sue, about whether we need to have a separate meeting or not. And I don't know that. And I know December gets hairy for a lot of people, but we need to also make this decision. I mean, it would be not, in my opinion, it would be nice in the December, by the December board meeting for us to make the decision. The question is, do we have to have another meeting beforehand, right?
Well, even if you get narrowed down to 3, to be able to vote on the one, it seems like you're gonna have to have a conversation beforehand to identify that.
I guess you're right.
Could we do a call, a conference call with Doug and the board to go over his executive summary and to share that information with us? And I'm looking at you, Counselor.
Yeah, that call would be an open meeting, so it would have to be done with the ability of the public to be
in a room,
in the room.
or call in.
Or call it.
And that, I mean, for those of us that are close, we could be here, but if your schedule's real busy for the month, you could just dial in and.
That would be
get the same
nice.
information.
We could set up a meeting that we could call into, talk to, walk through it with Doug, and then, I think your point's right, then we can make a decision whether we need to have some additional phone calls with additional firms, because maybe we decide we only need to interview 2 after the call with Doug. And maybe that should be our goal, is to try to get it down to, 1 or 2 that we can.
Doesn't seem, I mean, it sounds like you may already throw out 1, so really we're talking about 4.
Right.
And then surely there's some things that stand out or don't stand out among 4.
And
How
I think
much
the-
time would you need, Deb, to put together an executive summary and have that available for a meeting that we would hold here, but also people can just dial in for it if they're on the board?
I can have that done sometime next week. We can pull that together pretty quickly.
So we get Doug next week, then maybe we could have that phone call meeting to follow.
Which would be the normal week of the finance and audit committee meeting. We could just do it that day.
Do it that day.
Yeah.
Could we
sorry?
Because the board meeting in December is a week earlier, preparation for all board materials moves a week earlier. So ideally, this meeting and phone call would take place probably Monday the 9th or Tuesday the 10th.
And that's what we're
prepare-
talking, Tuesday the 10th is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I think
To be able to
Tuesday.
prepare a memo to act on it
That's when finance
following.
was gonna, that was gonna be that day, right, Michelle? That was the day FNA was gonna be, Tuesday the
Correct.
10th.
If that's enough time then to prepare a memo as a result of the conversation.
Yeah.
What kind of assets are there in the metro area for these firms? You pick one, does Des Moines have many firms that are capable?
Not to my knowledge.
Metro area.
Yeah, there may be others. I used my resources, through groups I belong to and that sort of thing to look at potential firms to contact. And I was made aware of one firm locally, but I'm not sure if there are, I'm not aware of any other examples.
How do most companies of any size, do they go out of Des Moines then to find that service? Or is there a network in Des Moines?
I think that's common for organizations to use firms that are outside of the Des Moines area potentially.
So it's been proposed to have the meeting at 3:30 or a dial-in call at 3:30.
On December 10th.
On December 10th. I should be able to jump on a call, but that's the day I'm flying back. So if I'm not on it, go ahead.
Well, and you'd have some time, Doug would give you the executive summary, so you would have some time if you wanted to, then to respond. Either call Doug
Sure.
directly, which I would encourage you to do.
Okay.
Or to, ask him something in an email.
Great.
And that's a long flight, so I wouldn't,
So 3:30 on the 10th, and by the end of next week, you'll have
Executive summary.
so the first part of the following week. I mean, we have a week to review it, that's,
that'd be great.
And my understanding is that will be noticed, public notice will be given as a board meeting with the electronic facilities so people can be connected electronically.
as a special board meeting.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we have the capacity to do dial in. We've always done dial out, but perhaps technically it can be done as a dial in.
Well, you'd have a meeting here, so if a member of the public wanted to come and observe the meeting, they could come here.
Yeah, there will be a public access point here.
Right.
There has to be.
Right.
But what I'm saying is technically it may need to be dial out rather than dial in.
For the board members?
Dial in is capable, we do
Yeah,
have that
we-
capability, I don't know how
We
many,
do have that capability.
I don't know the
Okay.
limit of number of dial-ins, but I'm pretty sure we could handle up
Five.
to the 5.
Okay. So we'll get that dial-in number
Yeah, you
from
can come.
Michelle so that people can dial in, or you can be here.
Oh,
Okay. Doug, don't you
So
miss
we'll be here anyway
it.
next week. Thank you for that.
Did we cover the issue of this meeting will then be 1 week prior to the actual board meeting? So this issue of being able to potentially create a recommendation within another day or two of this meeting, that's doable in your view?
I would.
The December meeting's early, is just the thing that we're trying
Good
to
point,
get.
Mike. Very good point.
I would believe that at the December 10th meeting, the board would share a preference, and
Right.
that would be the recommendation to be acted on. So I think we can pull something together. The meeting on December 10th, is it gonna be a special board meeting, or are we gonna reinstate finance and audit and have this
Special.
topic, special board
Because
meeting?
you're gonna you might potentially take a vote,
Okay,
right? I mean, we
Yes.
could potentially take a vote, so,
Could take both.
so if we take action that day, then we
If there's
won't
a
have to be prepared.
right.
Okay.
Great point. Okay.
And Andrew reminds me that some of us are gonna be here before that meeting, because we scheduled a meeting to talk about the Stowe Memorial preceding the finance and audit, and that's still on the calendar,
Oh,
so
good.
we'll actually be in the building, some of us, so.
Perfect. Great. Okay, and then, not on this particular topic, but one, and Graham, I'm gonna put you on the spot here, because I didn't give you much notice. I looked at your email about this. As part of this, we also will need to do a year-in interim CEO performance appraisal for Ted. And would you mind refreshing our memory how we've done that previously, and then
Why would we do that?
we do that for all of our employees at the end of each year.
Yeah, we were on a schedule, the annual review we did with Bill Stowe coincided on his hire date, so we always did that in August or September based on, you know, it was annual because it was his, you know, annual review. I don't know if I feel like we need to do
Well,
an
let's-
annual review.
Let's get an update from Doug. What we've done before, we can do whatever we want as a board. That's where I want to get feedback from everyone. So, Doug?
So our past process in recent years, we've actually had, I've sent out to the board the CEO evaluation form and requested that if anybody had input they wanted to include there, that they could provide that with that form and submit that back to me. Last year then, I think we had, with the evaluations that came back to me, that I then in turn sent those out to the entire board. And the board was given the option, if each member wanted to meet with the CEO, they could arrange those meetings directly and have that conversation directly with the CEO. And then Bill had always asked that his review be done during a public session, so that was how that was handled within the board meeting. And so I think those were really kind of, that's kind
So
of.
what was the time frame? When would you send it out to the board? When was it due back? All of that kind of thing. Do you know that, Doug?
So this was sent out, last year we started the process in early August with sending out the evaluation form, and then I asked that all of the, I think by middle of September, then the complete evaluations were sent back out to the board, and then it was discussed at the September 25th board meeting.
Okay.
So,
And what about all other employees? When are performance appraisals done?
We're currently in that process for, our bargaining unit employees, their reviews are done a little bit earlier, so they're on an October 1 through September 30 timeframe. And then for all of our, what we call our CPS employees, confidential, professional, and supervisory employees, that review is a January 1 through December review. We're working on those reviews currently, and so those review conversations will take place with those employees during mid-December. And then the pay increases for all of our employees take effect for January 1st.
Okay. So with that as a backdrop, what would the board like to do as far as providing feedback to Ted?
Did we put something in the contract or the write-up about how we were gonna work with Ted about whether it was a December timeframe or a different timeframe? Cause I thought we put something
We
in
did.
there about until the end of the year or later if
You
needed.
were right, there was some sort
I
of, do you
have terrible
remember?
memory, so.
Do you remember, Rick, I mean,
There was some specific language about by the end of the year, we would make a decision, and I don't remember what that
That
was.
strikes a chord, but I don't remember the specific language.
I think we need to look at that before we do anything else.
And I thought that was tied to compensation and not so much performance review, but I may be wrong.
I'm pretty sure there was a statement about compensation will be reviewed after the end of the year.
Could you provide that to us as a follow-up?
I'll have to do
board?
it as a follow-up, because I don't have it.
And we're not asking for action on this, I just wanted to put it on the table at Diane's request to find out the pleasure of the board as to how we would handle a year-end review.
Yeah, I'd like to see that language, and my thought is that it's been 6 months, and not a year, and that we're gonna be going through the CEO selection process at the same time, and so I don't know if we need to, unless the language of what we did when we named it interim says something different, I'm not sure we need to do anything.
Okay. Debbie, anything else that we need to know on this?
No, I don't think so.
Great, thank you very much. So no action on item 3J, other than we are asking for follow-up from Rick. Item 3K, approval of the second amendment of the 2009 Chapter 2080 agreement with the City of Des Moines to address water usage at the Blank Park Zoo. Please do tell.
Indeed, kind of a long time coming here, but as you all remember, in 2018, it was discovered that the Blank Park Zoo was not being billed for water, had never been billed for water, in spite of the fact that in 2003, the operation of the zoo was transferred to a foundation, which made them ineligible for free water. So there was discussion about that at the time. In September, this board authorized staff, directed staff to begin charging the zoo for water effective January 1st of 2018. And authorized staff to waive our rule 502.2.4, which requires a 5-year look back whenever we discover a billing issue like this. So effectively, we waived any back bills before the 1st of January 2018 and began billing the zoo. There were a number of discussions with the city and with representatives from the zoo about how that was going to happen, how they were going to pay their bills. The zoo was talking to the city, the zoo was talking to us, we were talking to the city. A number of discussions took place throughout that time. And then in June of this year, the city council took action to amend the Blank Park lease operation management and maintenance agreement that they have with the Blank Park Zoo Foundation to limit the zoo's responsibility for payment to no more than 10% for a year beginning July 1 of this year, and then 5% beginning this year, and then 10, and then 15, and 20 in successive years, so that their responsibility for water would be no more than 20% of their actual usage. That was an agreement between the city and the Zoo Foundation. So they actually amended their agreement without including us in that discussion, without including this board. Subsequent to that, we had a number of discussions with the city to determine how they would compensate the waterworks for the water use fees that they had waived for the zoo. And what we have come down to is basically two things. One, there's a back bill amount, an outstanding amount before this action was taken by the city, this limitation of what the zoo would be responsible for under their agreement with the city. There was a back balance of about $83,000 roughly, a lump sum amount, and then there is the amount of water going forward that on an annual basis is around $90,000, and that varies a little depending on their usage and depending on which year of this agreement that they're in, but it's around $90,000. To compensate the waterworks for those two amounts, the outstanding amount, which is a lump sum, and then this annual amount, the city has agreed to do two things. One is they have agreed to transfer the property on George Flagg Parkway just to the south of us here between the winery and there's an auto body shop. A property that we believe would be ideal for construction of our new grounds facility, would be outside of, would be on the dry side of the levee, get us out of our, what seems to be annual flooding issues. They've agreed to transfer that property to us, a property that has, we have not had the property appraised, but we looked at comparables in the area, and it has a comparable value somewhere in excess of $100,000 in our mind, probably more than that, actually.
How big of a piece of property is that?
It's 440 feet by 220 feet deep, so it's a substantial.
That's a big piece of property.
And it was our first request on property that we had asked
That
them.
was our first choice, yeah. They have several chunks that they own over there, and that was our preferred property. So it's ample room for our need in that case. So that's the one thing that they have agreed to do in exchange for the back billing, arrearage. The other thing that they have agreed to do is waive our sanitary sewer fees going forward for all of our offices, lock rooms, lunch rooms, shop areas, everything that is not the result of our water treatment process. And what I mean by that is, as you all know, we've installed a new nitrate removal facility, waste discharge pumping station that pumps the waste from that process to the WRA instead of directing it to the river. That is not included in this proposal. We have other waste streams that we currently do different things with. Our backwash water goes back to the beginning of the process and just goes back through, similar to the decant from our sludge dewatering process, that just goes back into the process. There's some very large flows that we handle without sending them to the sewer. If any of those would ever become sewered, those would not be included in this, but sinks and restrooms and locker rooms and offices, all of those kind of things, which is about $100,000 a year bill for us currently. So we're exchanging the zoo's water that they don't pay for to the tune of about $90,000 for that $100,000. That's $100,000 that we have paid on an annual basis for many, many, many years, which we will no longer be required to pay in exchange for the zoo paying a percentage of their bill, allowing the zoo to pay just a percentage, which they have never paid before. So we are receiving a benefit to the tune of $100,000 for waiving something that's not been paid in the past. We're continuing to waive, maybe that's a better way to put it. The last piece of this is just sort of an adder that the city wanted to include in there. In 2018, we started making them pay system development fees for their projects. They had never paid those in the past. They don't want to have to pay those. We don't have a lot of history there, but last year was about $30,000 worth of fees that they paid us. And we're proposing to waive those fees, to start waiving those fees again going forward. So that's the proposal, basically, update our agreement with the city to include those charges.
Is there anything in the, or do you want me to wait until?
Yeah, let's get a motion on the table to approve and authorize the chairperson, CEO, and general manager to execute the second amendment to the 2009 Chapter 2080 agreement with the city of Des Moines to address water usage at the Blank Park Zoo. Motion,
So moved.
second.
Second.
Okay, now,
Is there any language, I quick review, didn't see any, that we would review this on a regular basis to make sure that these numbers are still equal?
There isn't anything like that. The one thing that I will say from my perspective is that we anticipate sewer rates will go up more quickly than water rates. So if anything, we expect 100,000 to go more than the 90,000. The other thing is that we are working with the zoo. Amy and her folks are working to install sub-meters at the zoo to help them understand their water usage so that they can try to implement conservation measures. I think as part of our discussions, we've shared that they have a couple of facilities where they just continuously flow water through them all the time. We're trying to help them understand what exactly goes where and hope that they will implement some conservation. We also hope that, even though it's only 5, 15, 20% of the water, that's becomes a meaningful amount, that they'll have some incentive to conserve so that they don't become wasteful. I guess the one risk would be if the size of the zoo would double or triple.
Yeah, they get a polar bear exhibit.
They get a polar bear exhibit or something like that. There's some risk there. So, that's not included in this agreement. And that's not to say that the agreement can't be
Sure.
updated, but there's nothing specifically written in there today that says how that would be handled.
Okay.
So to get this right, so the first part is the amount of money we're owed, the 83,000. In exchange for that, we're getting a piece of property.
Yes.
The second piece is ongoing use of water. In exchange for that, we're getting the sewer fees waived.
Yes.
So then I get lost. Why is the third thing there? Why are we giving up the $30,000 in payments? Because I don't see where we benefit from that. I just see the city benefits.
Yeah, we don't benefit from that at all, other than the perspective that I would bring to that is the $30,000 is something they never paid until 2018. And then in the wranglings that we were having over some other fees, specifically the right-of-way management fees, which they were raising exponentially, we said, well, you should also pay these fees. If we're gonna have to pay all the fees that everybody else, you should. Well, since then, they've eliminated the right-of-way management fees. Those are gone completely. Not only are they not gonna continue to increase them to the $500,000 level that was proposed, but the $30,000 or $37,000 that we paid the last 2 or 3 years of those are gone.
So that's a fairer assessment, is to say that in a way, we're gonna give up these fees because we're not paying the right-of-way fees.
It is, Graham, but I didn't put that in there because I'm confident that they will find a way somewhere to recover those costs. But I felt okay with it. The other thing is, the $100,000 that they're gonna waive, that's actual money that we have paid every year. The money that we're waiving, the zoo's water, is, we're waiving something that's never been paid before.
I understand.
And so, between that and the right-of-way management fees, I felt very comfortable that this was a good deal.
Does it make
Fair
sense
deal.
though that this extra piece is in this 2080 agreement though?
Well, there are a lot of things in the 2080 agreement that we're adding this to. I can't put them all off the top of my head, maybe you can help me, but.
Well, it certainly covers the whole topic of free water, covers the sewer.
Covers other fees that we pay.
Covers other fees and relationships, and it's already been amended once. And this is the second amendment, and this is sort of the financial charter, if you will. I believe it covers pilot and a bunch of other things.
Yeah, it covers fees, and so I think this is an appropriate place to put that piece.
That is where the city wanted to document it, and I don't disagree that that was an appropriate place. And I would point out that the city council has approved this, it did so a month or two ago. So it's simply awaiting this board's approval if the board chooses to do so.
You know, that piece, as I said, was basically our reaction to, well, if we're gonna have to, if you're gonna continue to increase our fees and make us pay all the fees that everybody else pays, you should really pay these fees. Well, then those fees went away.
Are the elimination of the right-of-way fees that went away documented in the 2080 agreement?
No, that was a,
That was a unilateral decision by the city, heavily influenced by the litigation that they had where they went up to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals and lost that and had to go back down to federal court. I don't know why they decided to give up, but I think they may have decided the limitations on the fee were such that it was no longer practical to continue to assert it.
But were these fees, the system development fees, they were in the original agreement?
No.
So why are they in this agreement?
well, because they wanted us to continue to waive them, I guess would be
They
the.
want us to document something.
Yeah, that's what I really don't want. They don't have to document, but we have to document.
They don't have to document the right-of-way management fees.
Right.
Yeah, the right-of-way management fees were never part of any agreement we had with the city.
Nor were these.
True.
May I add something? The system development fees are addressed in our rules and regulations.
Uh-huh.
So the rules and regulations that were approved earlier in the board meeting, those revisions do state that the city would not have to pay for system development fees for non-enterprise uses.
But if-
So if that changes, we'll have to revise the rules and regs
But
language.
if we make a change to that, we would have to revise our rules and regulations, not go through another approval
Agreement.
process and agreement with the city and change the 2080 agreement. It'd be much easier for us to change our rules.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's fair. The rules and regs always historically have said that, well, not always, but historically, there was a period of time in my tenure here where the rules have said, the city doesn't have to pay these system development fees. There's a whole section in there on system development fees, and it defines what they are and how much they are, and then it said that the city doesn't have to pay them. And in 2018, we changed that to say the city does have to pay them. And so I get your point. It was never in an agreement anywhere else that said they did or they didn't. It was just in our rules. They asked us to incorporate it into this agreement.
Which ties our hands. I mean, we cannot go back and reinstitute these, and they can go and reinstitute what they want to do,
In terms of right-of-way management
Yeah.
fees.
Or any other.
or any
or
other.
any other fee.
But our hands are tied. I mean, if we want to start charging these fees in response to something they do, or because it's in our best business interest, we can't do it without
Updating. this.
updating this agreement.
Right.
So, good on them, they have out negotiated this.
Almost. I mean, we still have to
Right,
approve it.
right. But if we pass this, they've out negotiated this.
Well, this has been a long process. Graham, you've had numerous conversations with board members, with the city. I'm glad we have the first choice on the property because that was one that a couple of city council people said the value of that is way too high for the development that's coming through. We're not gonna give you that. So I think we won a few, but obviously it sounds like there's a sticking point there that we need to make a decision as a board whether or not we want to pass this and move on or have them take this back to the city council.
I mean, it's $30,000 annually so far that we are seeing an impact of.
And Michael, I guess we had 1 year of experience. We've charged them these fees 1 year. Well, and again in 2019, we were charging them. Do you have a sense of?
I would have to visit with Brian and review our records there. I don't have an answer.
Yeah, that's a annual fee based on one annum. But it's a meaningful
So let me just ask a process question. I'm not proposing that I would make this motion. If this board approved the 2080 but struck the language on the service development fees, what would happen? It would go back to the city and they'd have to consider whether they would approve the amended 2080 with the language that was struck?
Yes, and it would have to go back initially to city legal and city manager, and then I think it would probably have to go back to city council for
Approval of the amended document.
although what the city council had in front of it when it passed this wasn't the final form of the amended document, but I believe it did have all of the transactional elements in it. In other words, the thing that you're considering disapproving was part of what the city council approved. So you're kind of going back to square one if you want to change the substantive element of the deal.
Did the city approve, does the city have to take any further action if we approve this tonight?
No. Well, yeah. They don't have to take any further action on the 2080 agreement. After the 2080 agreement is fully executed by the city and by the waterworks, there will have to be a little bit of further process to actually convey the real estate that
They've
contractually
agreed to do that. Thank you.
So nothing further to put the 2080 agreement into final form and fileable situations.
So they made some sort of a motion to approve a document that contained these things.
Yes.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Or I was just gonna say, so if, I mean, how firm were they on this last piece that if we go back and say, wait, the first two make sense and we're happy to put that in a contract, the third one just isn't necessary because it's in our rules and regulations and this would be duplicating language, would they push back and say, no, we absolutely want it in a 2080 agreement?
You know, I don't have a good sense for that. I think that the expectation is that because the right-of-way management fees have been waived, that we're gonna waive these fees too. It was
Which
kind of-
we've done because it's in our.
It's in the rules and regs, and whether or not, if we went back to them and said, we wanna take it out of this agreement because it's already in the rules and regs, I don't have a sense. The other thing I would offer is, this is the second amendment to this agreement since 2009. I wouldn't call it a revolving door, but we're amending this agreement on a fairly regular basis. And if we get to the point where that's an unacceptable provision, we could amend it again.
Sure.
Is that
Both parties agree
reasonable?
or it could be terminated. There are powers of termination of that agreement.
It seems like there's a lot of good stuff in there though, and you wouldn't wanna terminate it for one piece. If there was just a way not to include this piece, then we wouldn't potentially lose all the other things that we've negotiated and secured in the process.
Rick, do you have a sense from having visited with their attorneys and how this came about, how strong of a holding point that is for them?
I didn't participate in the negotiation of the deal, so what happened is the deal was negotiated and it was handed to the city attorney to draft a form of amendment to 2080 agreement. When that was drafted, it was submitted to me for review. And frankly, we did have some drafting problems with the city, which necessitated a meeting that Ted and I attended with the city manager and the city attorney. But during all those discussions, there was never any attention paid to this aspect of the agreement. It wasn't part of the negotiation over the drafting of the agreement. It was just part of the business deal that had been reached.
And I can share with you, Steve, that the thing that really brought this connection fee or system development fee question to a head was the connections that are being made for the irrigation systems on Fuller Drive, which from the city's perspective were being made so that we, Jessica's folks, wouldn't have to be out with a truck irrigating Fluid Drive, and we were charging them thousands of dollars to make those connections, which they felt were our benefit, and that got a little contentious. And subsequent to that, they said, well, you know, we just need to go back to the way that was. The right-of-way management fees are gone. We just need to take this back. You know, it's been a year that we've been charging them these fees. I don't feel bad about not charging them these fees. And it's only for projects that are subject to free water. The free water that they get from us, the fees pale in comparison to the free water that we give them for these projects. But I do understand your concern that we've negotiated into an agreement now, and it's harder for us to change our mind going forward. That piece I do understand.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm fine with that, with, you know, removing those fees. It's more of that second piece.
Okay, so another process question. So another way we could do this, what would happen if we didn't approve this document tonight and instead we asked the staff, Ted and the staff, to go back and ask the city if it would be acceptable to them that we've changed our rules, the fees aren't gonna be charged, and that we not include that language in the agreement because we've already acted, and then vote on this agreement, hopefully without that section in it in December. What harm would that cause us or them if we took another month and had that discussion?
I think the only potential harm is that they would have to go back to council and get them to approve it. And if the council disagreed with that for whatever reason.
The other thing that could happen is it could reopen the whole discussion. When you open up one point, they might open
Well-
up additional points themselves.
Right, and that was because we have two things, right? We could amend it, do what I said the first time, and pass it with an amendment, and then send it back to them. They don't have any choice at that point, but then to act on the, to accept or reject the amended document. What I'm saying is take a half step and say, not take any action, and say, what if this happened? Would you be acceptable to that? And then we would pass the amendment.
With the backup, as Amy has said, that we've already approved in the rules and regs, so.
Right, and the city has already approved this 2080 and this kind of.
We're not saying that we're not gonna do this, we just don't know if it needs to be.
Don't know if it needs to be as part of this agreement.
I would just offer that we're gonna waive the fees. We're risking a really good deal here, reopening a really good deal, so that in the future, if we want, it's easier.
That's my point. No matter how you handle it procedurally, if the board doesn't approve the agreement that's tendered, I wouldn't say it's impossible. The city wouldn't. If we go back to renegotiate the deal, they could attempt to renegotiate some other points as well. Without regard to the procedure adopted, because it's not a deal until everybody signs it.
Remind me, I just want to get this straight in my head, because you said a minute ago you weren't in on the negotiations.
I did not participate in the business negotiations. That's
So that was you.
That was me,
And who else? Do you?
basically just me.
With numerous attempts to try to set up the meeting, I will say too, it was not the easiest thing to accomplish.
You know, we talked about it at least one chair, vice chair meeting.
Yes.
Here are some considerations, here are some things we might offer, here are some things that might be equivalent. Amy did a lot of analysis of how much are the zoo's fees, how much are our fees, how much are all these fees, do they seem to add up?
I see the risk of losing the first two by not passing this. It just is frustrating, guys.
Yeah. Well said, I agree with you. I mean, I want to see the first two happen. I mean, and Ted, I shared this with you before. I mean, this is why I think a lot of us get frustrated at government, because this is a complicated deal. where really it shouldn't be that complicated. The whole point was whether the zoo should pay for its water or not.
Right.
And we should figure out that the zoo pays for the water and the rest of the stuff we should figure out individually. But this is where we are.
Yeah,
And as I said, I
it's
think
never that easy.
This is where people get frustrated with government because this is a somewhat convoluted deal.
Well, at the end of the day, we're not gonna pay $100,000
I understand.
that we used to pay. We're waiving things that they've never paid.
I understand.
We're waiving things that we've never received before, and we're getting $100,000 a year worth of credit for that.
Right.
And I think that's very positive to our bottom line. Philosophically, is it exactly right? I don't know, but I got past that months ago, I'm gonna be honest.
Well, you had to solve a problem, and you worked to solve a problem, and I appreciate that.
And it was it was a lot of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
And how many meetings and what is the time worth too?
And I understand the
It's just-
frustration that, oh, it ended up in the agreement. You know, from my perspective, we've had system development fees for, 30-plus years, and we've charged them those fees for 1 year. And what's the chance that we're gonna wanna start charging them again? In my analysis, I thought that was a small chance, and I was willing to take that chance. But, you're the decision makers, and at the end of the day, you have to make the decision that you're comfortable with.
And as I said, it's all academic at this point, but, I'd like for the city to pay for its water. I'd like for the zoo to pay for its water. I'd like for us to pay for our sewer fees. I think those things are clean in the way that, things should happen.
And it
These
encourages us all to use things
Right,
wisely.
that's right. These deals start making things
Agreed.
complicated and questionable and all those things, but I can't unravel that mess of yarn.
The relationship is complicated because it's evolved over a long period of time. And that's why we have this very lengthy and twice amended 2080 agreement.
I would argue that sometimes it hasn't evolved, and that's the problem.
It's devolved. It has devolved in some ways.
I'll make one observation about the 2080 as we have it and as presented for the amendment. The process of getting this amendment in place was considerably easier and wasn't as contentious and difficult as the last amendment. The last amendment was a nightmare in terms of the acrimony involved, and this one was a little easier to put into place.
Well, there were a number of meetings that were very difficult. I mean, maybe you weren't there, but
Yeah,
there were,
it's all a question of observation.
there were some very tough meetings up front with keys
And
being
I just-
thrown on the table by the chairman of the finance committee or whatever for the zoo, so.
It helps that over that time period, we have increased our pilot fee by a substantial amount
Yeah.
as well.
Over all those years.
Yes.
So
I
are
guess I
we
should-
ready for a vote? Are we ready for a vote? And board members are welcome to hold their noses while they vote. So all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Sue, before we go on to the next items, I do have in front of me the materials on what was done when Ted was appointed as interim CEO.
Could you just send that to us? Could you,
I could read it now, or I
could you just send it to everyone? Because I think we need Diane to weigh in on this as well, so.
Yes.
Yeah, we aren't taking any action today on this, so thank you. Board committee reports, planning committee, do we have anything to report?
I think
We
talked
took action.
Rules and regs.
Finance and audit, we.
I thought we had a finance and audit meeting last week, but it was actually a board meeting.
Okay, so customer relations committee, we have been involved in ongoing meetings, and I don't think we had an actual committee meeting though. Billstone Memorial, I heard you mention something, Graham.
Yeah,
Andrea, do you want to update us?
Yeah, we're gonna meet again on the 10th. There's a couple of ideas that are out there floating on how we're gonna do this, and I think I told you folks before that it's kind of a great idea to combine this education component in conjunction with the Citizens Water Academy, and then actually building some sort of a memorial in the park. A a subcommittee of the committee has met with the Public Arts Foundation to talk about a sculpture. And I think they're rethinking whether it's more of a sculpture or if it's a, and we haven't talked about this committee yet, but they're also exploring the opportunity to think about it more as an architectural piece, if you will, or a landscaping piece, creating kind of an outdoor room and an education piece, which we'll talk about on the 10th, which is fascinating. Bill's family has gotten involved and are very excited about this. Again, I'll share with the committee before I share with this group, but I have had some very encouraging news about funding for this, which is pretty exciting, from a lot of different segments of the community. So I think when we meet on the 10th, we'll have an idea of a budget for this, which would be great. And just in case I didn't mention this before, the thought is the educational piece will focus on the gallery system and educating the community about what happens underneath our feet at the park, but also then would be able to expand broader than that. So that's a whole lot of saying nothing at this point, except that probably in December, we'll have a pretty clear idea. And the goal remains to have some sort of an event in April of next year. Hopefully it's a ribbon cutting, and that's our goal.
Great.
So.
Thank you. Des Moines Waterworks Park Foundation Board, any kind of an update?
I wasn't on the last meeting call, so
I don't think there's anything big right now.
Okay. And Laura? Let's see.
Laura unfortunately is out ill today, but her memo is here. A couple of quick comments. We did have a roundtable with Congresswoman Axie about PFAS and the needs there in terms of funding for further investigation. Our 100th anniversary was very successful, very well received by the public and employees. Great event. And then some comments there about the Water Academy, which was also very well received by the participants.
Great. CEO and General Manager comments. Do you have anything for us, Ted?
I'm going to be quick, but I do have one thing that I would really like to share with you, and that relates to Fleur Drive and our efforts on the planters, in the planters on Fleur Drive. I think that most of you are aware that early in this year, this calendar year, Jessica and I, met with John Ruan, we met with Doug Hare, Matt McCoy. We met with a group of people and shared with them some of our challenges associated with the planters in the Fleur Drive medians. Not only the site distance issues and the traffic issues that we create when we're out there, the site distance issues of the plantings, but also some of the things that Jessica's staff has really worked hard on, plants that die out, planters that are flooded and then are a disaster with weeds. There are many challenges that we have had over the last 20 years, and we made some fairly radical recommendations, including removing a number of planters completely, and they were not well received. Let's just say that. But they did result in the Ruans retaining Doug Hare to look at all the problems, work very closely with Jessica and her staff, and they have come up with a complete redo of these planters that Jessica will be sharing with us at a future planning committee meeting. You can look forward to that, but I will just share that Doug Hare and his staff have put together a completely different palette of plants, different heights, different resiliencies to weather and salt, and they're going to completely redo them. What you see there now, you won't recognize them when they get done with this proposed upgrade. We're excited about it. They have addressed many, if not all, of our concerns, and we're very pleased about that because initially we got kind of a stonewall reaction, but they have really come to the table with great ideas, and I think you'll be pleased when Jessica shares them in more detail here in a month or two.
Is Janice Ruan happy?
To the best of my knowledge, she's very happy.
Then I'll be happy.
Yes. The Ruans are very pleased. Completely different look and feel to these planters, and they are happy with it. It's kind of a apparently the industry is moving away from the formal garden look and moving more to the naturalistic sort of thing. I won't spoil the whole surprise because I want you to hear from Jessica when she presents, but
So will our workers no longer be watering in a truck with a hose where it creates a safety?
one of the proposals here is that every single median will be irrigated. Some, even the ones that are not impacted by fluid ride construction will receive irrigation. Some of the planters that we have to plant on a regular basis, we won't have to plant on a regular basis anymore, so more of them are gonna be perennial instead of all annual. There are gonna be, so yes is the answer to that question. And the thought is that this is gonna start happening as we replant after fluid ride construction, but Jessica has the timeline and how all that will work that she will share. Not the next planning committee meeting, which is just next week, right? There, we're gonna talk about the ground shop and the barn. Barn is scheduled for removal. The ground shop is scheduled for relocation now that you have approved our agreement with the city. Thank you. We have property on the way that we can use to facilitate construction of a new facility. So that's what we're gonna talk about at the next planning committee.
And I'll just say about the barn, I'll add in one thing about the barn, is there's some thought that that's kind of where this outdoor room for Bill Stowe might end up, which there's great poetry there.
There is great. Yeah, I'm not a lover of barn, but I love the spot.
You know, Doug, that's the right solution for Fluor, to sit down with Doug and Janice,
Yeah.
because their hearts, Janice is a good person, her heart's in it, and she can see it's done.
Well, my hat is off to all of the participants because when Jessica and I met with them the first time, they were not interested in the concept, but they listened and they heard and they're talking with their dollars here. They got Doug Hare and his group, and they've done an enormous amount of work and come up with some great ideas.
You know, people just have to think about it overnight, because the purpose, she's on our side, she's really stepped up for the park.
Yeah, and, you know, she's a proponent of Des Moines. She wants
Yeah.
that great entrance to Des Moines, I know. But it will be great.
Ted, can I ask one question on the OSHA injuries?
Yes, she.
Year to date, we have 6, which is down, I believe, from 9 last year. Was 9 our number as of the end of last year?
That sounds about right. I fear that we're at 7 now,
Okay,
but yes.
my question is on this strain. Is that picking up something heavy? Is that strain as in
It's
an injury?
it's all of the above. Anything that someone would do that would, some of those are operating valves, stop boxes, some of them are lifting, some of them are, they are different things in the strain category, and I can't
No, that's,
tell you what exactly the strains on this list were.
and
but
caught
it's-
between, is that they're caught between 2 vehicles?
No, that's more of a pinch point sort of a thing. You know, those are OSHA recordable categories.
I see.
And so if you get caught between 2 pieces of a rotating piece of equipment, or caught between something that's falling on the floor, and that's a caught between. Anybody have a better definition?
Well, the caught between was a pinch finger and basically a tailgate.
Yeah. Someone got a tailgate closed on
Clearly
their
pinch
hand.
point concept.
And the hearing loss is, that one's understandable, but strain is any number of activities can result in a strain.
I assumed that, but thank you for clarifying.
Can I insert one thing about the botanical garden?
Yes.
And I think I mentioned this before, but I want to put that in. Sometime in the first half of 2020, I think we should have a meeting with the botanical garden to talk about the future.
Okay.
That contract of ours is going to expire in the next few years. And the garden's at the point of thinking about that. They're starting a second phase project, and they're doing some things. And I don't have any clear direction about what we need to do, but we as an organization need to think about what our vision is for the next part of this agreement. You know, whether we continue at all, and if we do, what it looks like. And I think it would be smart for us to get ahead of the ball, and that would mean in the first 6 months of 2020, we should have that discussion with them.
And you're still our representative,
I am.
correct? So maybe, are you suggesting that you and Ted?
Yeah, that's what I'm
decide?
suggesting, and by putting it out here so that we're all aware of that, I mean,
Great,
this board is gonna have to make a decision at some point, like I say, whether we continue that relationship, and just as a reminder, we provide in-kind services to them, every year, and to up to a certain amount. We provide a certain amount of free water, which I've already made my, thoughts on free water clear tonight. That probably should come to an end at the end of the 10-year agreement. And so these are things that we're, as a board, we need to kind of decide.
Right.
I think the first step is for Ted and I to have a conversation with the Potato Garden and kind of understand where they are, and then this board can have a discussion about where we are.
do we have proper meters and things to give them what their costs would have been?
Yeah, they are metered.
Okay, so I think that's probably valuable information when you go in.
Right. So I just want to put it out there. Nobody's asking us for the meeting. I think we should be the instigator.
Yeah, that's good.
Anything else come before the board or questions for Ted? Okay, with that, I will take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.